During the 1980s, South Africa had a very aggressive foreign policy. In fact, it was a policy of bullying anybody in the region that was weaker. In 1981, a bunch of mercenaries tried to overthrow the Seychelles government. The full story of South Africa's involvement has never been told, until now.
The Seychelles are tourist heaven. For years, holidaymakers have flocked to these islands, strung out like jewels in the Indian Ocean. But in 1977, trouble came to paradise. Seychelles President, Sir James Mansham, was ousted in a coup led by Albert René. Mansham had been a friend of apartheid South Africa. René, a socialist, was not. He was soon to discover how unfriendly his South African neighbours could be. Not only were the islands strategically important to the navies that patrolled the Indian Ocean, they were also a refuelling stop for South African Airways on their long-haul flights to Asia. Pretoria was upset when René imposed sanctions by cancelling SAA's landing rights at the airport on Mahé Island, capital of the Seychelles. Seychelles refugees from the Mansham regime fled to Durban, and when they asked for assistance in getting back to power, South Africa was willing to talk. Enter Martin Dolinczek, then a senior operative of the National Intelligence Service.
So I was sent to one guy, he was the Minister of Tourism. I forget his name, but hell. In any case, he was in a flat in central Durban, and I went to see him in one morning on instruction of South African government, which gave instruction to the Bureau for State Security, and I had interview with him, a long interview. He said that there wouldn't be much problem because the army is small, the access is quite free, there is no much control to access the island by sea, possibly air. And then Mike Ho come on the scene. Mike Ho was quite a legend, sort of, among South Africans, and apparently in mercenary circles in Africa, because he was leading an expedition into Belgian Congo at that stage, and he told me he and the CIA put Mobutu in power, so to speak.
We disposed of the enemy quickly there.
It was decided that South Africa would hire mercenaries, recruited and led by Ho, to pull off a coup to oust René and put Mansham back in power. At this stage, according to Dolinczek, the operation fell under the control of the National Intelligence Service, headed up by Dr. Neil Barnard.
Of a challenging future.
In 1980, Neil Barnard visited the Durban office where we had sort of a Christmas party. Jimmy Claessens was there. And during the party, he came to me and says, the State Security Council approved the plan. So he asked me to call up Mike Ho for a meeting, for a breakfast meeting the next morning, which I did, and they met for the breakfast there where Mike Ho had a certain instruction. I was not there, so I wouldn't know. But everybody was happy.
Jimmy Claessens and Neil Barnard were sending Dolinczek instructions from headquarters in Pretoria. Then suddenly, something changed.
Bureau for State Security's headquarters sends the signal down to us, to me, to say that I must tell Mike Ho to report in Pretoria urgently. He went to military intelligence in Poynton Building in Pretoria, where there was Brigadier Badenhorst and Brigadier Martin Maritz, I think. When Mike Ho came there, he said he came there in connection with the Seychelles operation. So military intelligence, these two gentlemen, they were quite abrupt. They says who? So Claessens was there, Jimmy Claassen, and he says that's the Prime Minister's instructions. Prime Minister then was P.W. BOTHA. Then they say, where's the document? So they didn't have the document, so Claassen left and got a letter from the Prime Minister saying that the operation of Seychelles is being transferred from the Bureau for State Security to the Directorate of Military Intelligence.
The military insisted on two conditions. First, that the mercenaries should not be South African nationals. And second, that the arms should travel to the islands separately from the soldiers of fortune. Mike Hoare ignored military intelligence on both counts.
He says, but I cannot get 200 foreigners here. And I cannot go to Europe to recruit either. So he asked me, he says, do you think we can float this preconditions? So I say, well, if they don't know, they don't know. If it's success, they want. If the coup itself is success in Seychelles, that will be very unlikely they will come back to you.
So, with Dolinček as his NIS liaison, Mike Hoare proceeded to recruit 50 mercenaries who were offered $20,000 each, plus the promise of a bonus from Mansham if all went well.
The arms were come from South African Defence Force. I tested the arms with his brother-in-law and one other guy I didn't know. I think was another little son of Mike Hoare. The arms were dismantled, the butts were removed, the bags, cricket bags or valises were purchased from game stores. The false buttons were installed and they were stored there. National Intelligence Service asked me to remain with them to keep an eye and report. So I stayed with and I rendered sort of a supportive service. Because what the military actually done was just to deliver the arms, approve the Mike Hoare's plan. They didn't delegate it, as far as I could see, anybody there to say do this, do that, don't do this or don't do that.
In October, Hoare sent his brother-in-law, Robert Sims, to establish a safe house on the Seychelles. Dolinček arrived in Mahe on November 14th, 2 weeks ahead of D-Day.
In those 2 weeks, I basically drove around the island, past the military barracks, and just observed if there is any unusual activities. Go through all the roads, see if there is any roadblocks or something, but everything was nice and quiet.
1 week before D-Day, 4 more of the mercenaries flew in, carrying weapons in false bottoms installed in their bags. Everything was proceeding smoothly. November 21st, D-Day arrived. Dolinček, Sims and the 4 others went to the airport to meet Mike Hoare and the 44 mercenaries who were travelling disguised as the Ancient Order of Froth Blowers, a group of charitable, beer-drinking tourists. But inside their bags were AK-47s.
Mike Hoare came out already. He came to the guy, say hello, smiling, nice or whatnot. So there were still other people coming through the door, and all of a sudden there was lots of shouting, and a shot or 2 were fired.
A vigilant Seychellois customs officer had noticed the butt of an AK sticking out of the torn lining of one of the tourists' bags. He searched the froth blower's luggage, and all hell broke loose.
But we couldn't see. We were outside the airport, but quite near, about 50 feet across. But we didn't see what happened, but you could imagine. So there was a commotion. So Mike Hoare was shouting, "You people go down."
In the shootout that followed, Dolinček got cut off from Mike Hoare and his men who had taken over the airport. He then decided to wait it out at a nearby hotel. During the night, an Air India jet landed and was seized by the mercenaries, who forced the pilot to fly them back to Durban, leaving just 4 men behind to cover their exit. The 4 then melted into the mountains. But there was no escape from the island, and in the days and nights that followed the abortive coup, Dolinček sat tight in his hotel.
So I go to my room, change, and I come down, and I order myself a drink when there is a guy across the, it's an outside bar, sort of a horseshoe, a huge one. So I see the guy right across, which looked very similar to Brigadier Barnhorst's, from Director of Military Intelligence. He was there with the camera on his neck, with the two teenage sons were there. So, but I was not very sure. Well, across it was dark, but that's what was my first impression. So then the waiter comes to me with double whiskey and soda, and he says, "That's for you." I said, "I haven't got enough money here. It have to be to organize tomorrow." So he said, "No, it's from that gentleman." And he points at that same guy, which I thought was Brigadier Barton. So I said, "Thank you." So I take this, I do like this, went like this, then he left. I don't know where he went, but he just left.
But police were combing the island for mercenaries, and within a week they had narrowed their focus down to the single, fit-looking South African national who was calling himself Anton Lubitsch. Dolinček was pulled in.
So I said to him, seeing there is no South African diplomatic representative here, I demand to see British High Commissioner. So Commissioner looks at me and says, "But you got that chick. You got that chick." So he called somebody and he said, "Take him down to the clink." So he did it, guys. Then I knew more than ever that he knows the full story. But these gentlemen, as a matter of fact, he said to me, "You're lucky we are not like your apartheid police who kills people. I could get a story easily out of you, but I'll wait."
Martin Dolinček stuck to his story until Robert Sims was brought in.
The door opened and Sims walks in. And he said, I told him everything. The game is over. So I told him.
It is quite clear that certain people who took part in the invasion here were working for the South African government.
I assure you, Mr. Chairperson, that the Seychelles coup was neither discussed nor approved by the South African Cabinet or the State Security Council.
Neither the TRC or the special report have been able to find any Cabinet or State Security Council documents relating to this. But what is clear is that, to this day, neither P.W. Botha nor the then SADF have told the full story of their involvement in the Seychelles coup attempt. Neil Barnard is now the Director General of the Western Province Government. The special report asked him for an interview, but Dr. Barnard referred us to his lawyer, who said that he was not prepared to comment. Charles Lloyd was then in military intelligence, and while he must have been involved in the planning of the Seychelles operation, when he came to the TRC earlier this year, he shed no new light on his or the military's involvement. According to Dolinček, while he was imprisoned, naked and in chains, senior members of NIS and the South African government came to Mahe to negotiate with the Seychellois. Dolinček expected them to visit him.
So I was sort of in anticipation the whole day. They will come and see me, comfort me, give me a cigarette. I'm a smoker. I didn't smoke for what seems to me like a long time and whatnot. Comes about 5 o'clock. The same major from military intelligence, chief of military intelligence in Seychelles tells me, say, "I got bad news for you. They don't want to see you."
Dolinček felt he'd been betrayed by the NIS, so he decided to make contact with the ANC. The Seychellois authorities arranged a meeting.
I regarded that interview as a failure. As a matter of fact, even there was this intelligence major sitting in the interview when Comrade Muzwai police left. He said, "But this old man was not very nice with you." said, well, that's how it goes. The beggars can't be choosers.
Dolinček was tried and sentenced to 20 years. Sims and the 3 captured mercenaries got death sentences commuted to life. In Durban, Mike Hoare and his posse got sentences of between 6 months and 20 years for the seizure of the Air India aircraft.
Nothing, I resigned to my fate.
Then, in August 1982, he was presented with an extraordinary opportunity. The Seychelles military, stationed at the barracks where Dolinček, Sims and the others were imprisoned, staged a rebellion against President René. Dolinček broke out of his prison and assisted the troops loyal to René. The rebellion was crushed and he became a local hero. As a reward, Dolinček and the other South Africans were moved to President René's private island. Meanwhile, the Seychelles negotiated with South Africa over compensation for the damages caused by Mike Hoare's mercenary coup attempt.
We used to joke, I said, people pay lots of money to be in that sort of a paradise island, and we are complaining. It was perfect. So one morning, aeroplane lands, and say, everybody go home. So we went home. René, though he didn't spell it out, but indication was he got his money from South Africa, because that was basically when he was saying all the time, when I get money, you get home. Obviously, he got his, as a matter of fact, it was confirmed, he got his $22.5 million, which was quite a lot in those days. And I think he did the right thing.
Back in South Africa, Dolinček hid out on a farm for almost a year before deciding to risk all. He headed for Harare, where he made contact with the ANC.
Comrade Muzwaye Piliso, he was the head of the ANC intelligence and security. He said, I know the guy. So he sent people from Zambia to debrief me, which debrief lasted about a week in a motel outside Harare. I was asked questions, everything from sexual inclination, from my birth, my schooling, my associations, my ideology, my beliefs, my work, which I think I answered honestly, to the best of my ability. There were 6 people who were debriefing me, and on the end, they went into conference for about half a day. I was biting my nails because my fate was in their hands. When they come back, they say, from now on, you Comrade Paul Smith. It was my MK name. So I was relieved and glad. When the peace talk started, I came back to Lusaka, where I was second in charge of all logistics and ANC property that includes farms and training grounds. And my chief was George Naika. Glory be to George Naika. And it was quite nice. And then on the end of '93, I came back.